First line of Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. The Gemara starts here, continuing regarding the Seder of the Aveda Dana Yom Kippur, that it said in the Mishnah, you have to be particular about that Seder. We had an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia, whether it refers only in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, or even the Avedas that are done outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, as long as it's done with the white garments. And here, the Gemara said before that if it's an Aveda done outside, but it's for the purpose of what's going to be happening inside, if you're shechting the carbon to bring the blood in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you're doing the chafina of the Keteres with the purpose to bring it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, everybody would agree that that has to be done in the right Seder. So the Gemara brings another halacha related to all of this. Oma Ula said, Sa'ir sheshachtai kaidem matan damei shel par. The sar that was shechted before you brought the blood inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim to spray the blood there. You've done nothing. In other words, the Seder, the way it was is, not only was the blood of the par, sprayed in the Kodesh HaKadoshim before the blood of the Sa'ir, but you didn't do the shechita. The order was, first you shechted the par, and you brought it in, and you did the zrika inside. Only after you were done with the zrika, then you came to do the shechita of the Sa'ir. So therefore, if he did the shechita of the Sa'ir before he did the zrika of the dam of the par, that's out of order. You've done nothing. It's tzarich pnim, and therefore it's out of order. Tana, what did we learn in our Mishnah? Hikdim dam ha-Sa'ir l'dam ha-par. If you sprayed the blood of the Sa'ir before you sprayed the blood of the Sa'ir, yachze v'yazeh midam ha-Sa'ir achadam ha-par. You have to do it over and spray the blood of the Sa'ir after you spray the blood of the dam ha-par. So in the Mishnah, all it says is that you have to spray the blood over again. If what Ula says is true, so it should have said, that now you have to do the shechita over again. Right? Because apparently, if he sprayed the blood of the Sa'ir before, there's another problem here, that he also did the shechita out of order. The shechita of the Sa'ir was done before, so he has to do the shechita all over again. Why didn't it mention that in the Mishnah? So the Gemara answers, Tirgema Ula explained that what the Mishnah, when it says this case, is speaking about it's not talking about that he did the blood of the Sa'ir before the blood of the par inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's referring to the Heichal. And if it's referring to the Heichal, so the Shechita wasn't necessarily done out of order. Once you're coming to the Heichal, the Shechita of the Sa'ir was already done. So then he took the Sa'ir and he sprayed it before the par in the Heichel. And the only thing that he has to switch around is the zrika of the blood, but not the shechita all over again. The Mishnah is talking about the matanis and the Heichel that were done out of order, and therefore really what the Gemara here is saying is that this part of the Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Nechemia, that says that even outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Heichel, if the zrika was done out of order, you have to do it over again. The next thing it said in the Mishnah was v'chein beheichal, v'chein b'mizbeach, v'chulu. So what it said in the Mishnah was that if you made a mistake with the blood that was done inside the heichal, so you have to do that over again. But you don't have to go back to what was done in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Mishnah basically explained that two points the Mishnah said. One point the Mishnah said was that whatever is done inside if you make a mistake in the heichal, so you have to repeat that. You don't have to go back to what's done in Kodesh HaKadoshim. There are three separate stages here. Kodesh HaKadoshim, the zrik is there, the heichal, and then what's done in Mizbeach. If you make a mistake in each one of these stages, you have to repeat that stage. You don't have to go back to the previous stage. And then there was the other machlokes in the Mishnah, which the Gemara is going to soon discuss. Machlokes between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon. If you make a mistake in the middle of one of these stages, what do? Do you have to start all over from the beginning of that stage? For example, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the middle of the zrika, by the fifth zrika, you made a mistake. Do you have to start all over from the beginning? Or you don't have to start from the beginning. You start, you have to, the blood, what were we talking about over there actually? Talking about the blood that's spilled. Not a mistake. What happens if the blood spilled, that was, right? So if the blood spilled in the middle, do you have to start all over from the beginning? Or you bring new blood and you have to shech the new carbon. The blood spilled, you have to shech the new carbon, but you take off from where you made the mistake, from where the blood spilled, that is. That's Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon. Whereas the Tanna Kama said, no, if the blood spilled, you're going to have to start all the way from the beginning. So the Gemara is going to discuss this, but before it does, it brings another braisa where it brings the purpose of all of these rikis. What's the purpose of the kapara here? Tana Rabbanon, in a braisa we learned where it explains the pasuk that what's the purpose of the kapara. So you look on the side there, you have the whole full pasuk. It says the kapara v'chiper es mikdash hakodesh. the kapara of the spraying these bloods in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, or B'chlal Yom Kippur. So it's going to be mechaper for Mikdash HaKodesh, V'Soil Mayid, V'Samizbech Yichaper, V'Alakaynim, V'Kolam HaKol Yichaper. So the pasuk here mentions a lot of different details what the purpose of this kapara is for. So the Braisa will explain what they're all about. So Tana Rabbana, we learned in a Braisa v'chiper es Mikdash HaKodesh. When it says that it's mechaper on Mikdash HaKodesh, on the kedusha of the Kodesh, what does this refer to? Zelufnai v'lifnim. This refers to the tumah of a person that while he was tumah, he walked into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and as Rashi here says, it's talking about a case that when the person walked in, he was aware that he's tumah and he walked in anyways. So there was the idea, he knew what he was doing before in the beginning, and then later he forgot about this, and he's supposed to bring a carbon oil v'yated. Right? So he knew before, and then what happens is it was a yidiyah in the beginning, but then actually when he walked in, he didn't realize where he was going, and he went to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. But then later, he forgot all about this. He doesn't know that he has to bring a carbon. So now, until he's going to remember what he did, until he's going to realize what he did, and he's not going to bring a carbon, so Yom Kippur is mechaper for that, for entering into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That's Mikdash HaKodesh. Then when the pasuk says it's mechaper for oil mayid, it's mechaper for entering betumah into the oil mayid, that's zeh heichel, that's entering into the Kodesh, into the heichel. Then when it says mizbeach k'mashmoi, refers to going by the mizbeach when you're tumah. There are two pshatim in this. One is that he was there and he remained there the period of time that you're not allowed to. Rashi says kedei ishtachvoya, as long as it takes for a person to bow. It's one pshat, or another pshat is it refers to someone doing the aveda on the mizbeach while he was tameh. It's mechaper for that. And then the pasuk says yechaper. It adds that it said already in the beginning v'chiper. It says again yechaper elu azares. That's b'chlal entering into the azares, any of the parts of the azara while you're tameh. Then it says hakayanim, that the karbanis, the bloods that you bring on Yom Kippur, is mechaper for the kayanim kimashmon. It it means literally, it's mechaper for any of the kayanim that did any of their avodah, anything that wasn't done the way it's supposed to be done. Then it says am hakohol, that the karbanis Yom Kippur are mechaper for all the Yidden. Eilu Yisrael, this refers to all other Avedas B'chlal, that Yom Kippur is mechaper on all Avedas for all Yidden. Then it says again Yechaper, Eilu HaLeviim. This refers to all the Leviim that it's mechaper for them. So then, the pasuk is saying here, when it says Yechaper, in the end, Hushvu Kulan Lekapara Achas, that all of these, all the Yidden, the Kayanim, the Leviim, are all equal with one kapara for all of the Avedas, besides the Karbanis, which it says here, that they're mechaper for the Tumah, that they entered into the Beis HaMikdash. So for that you have the blood that was sprayed inside the Beis HaMikdash. And they're mechaper for the Tumah, and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and the Heichal, and by the Mizbeach, and the Azara. But then when the pasuk concludes another time at the end, Yechaper, what this is saying is that everybody is included together and equally in one kapara. And where is this? How and in what part of the Aveda are they all included in one kapara? Shekulam miskaprim b'soir ha-mishtaleach b'shar averis. This refers to the soir that's sent off to the Azazel, and that's mechaper on the rest of all of the averis of the Torah on Yom Kippur through this soir ha-mishtaleach. And that includes all Yidden equally, the Kayanim, the Leviim, and the Yisraelim. That's the Tanakama.
The beginning of the pasuk, v'chippers, was through which carbon?
That's the par and the soir that are brought inside. The zrikas that are done in the Kodesh HaKadoshim and in the Heichel and the Mizbeach, that's mechaper on the Tumah of Mikdash. Then the rest of the Averis are neskaper through the Soyer Mishtaleach, and that's kailul all the Klal Yisrael together. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's how Rabbi Yehuda interprets this pasuk. Shimon Aimer, Rabbi Shimon says, no, we divide the kapara a bit differently. Kishem shedam ha-soyer anasa b'fnim. The dam of the soyer that's brought inside, and you spray the blood inside, mechaper al Yisrael betumas mikdash v'kedasha. It's mechaper on the Yidden for the tumah, that if you entered into the Beis HaMikdash in any of the places when you were tameh, it's mechaper for that. Kach dam apor mechaper ala kainim betumas mikdash v'kedasha. So too for the kainim, what's their kapara for entering while they're tameh? That's with the par. Okay, so we have the carbon for the Yidden, the soir chatos that's brought for the Yidden, and there's the par that's brought for the kainim that's mechaper for them. So in that sense, he's the same like Rabbi Yehuda. There's the kapara for the kainim and for the Yidden separately for their tumas. That's why there's two karbanas. But now Rabbi Shimon takes this a step further, and he says, "Okishem shevidui shel soir amishtaleyach mechaper al Yisrael b'shar averes." So by the Yidden, what's mechaper for the rest of the averes on Yom Kippur It's the vidui that the Kayin said before he sent away the Sar going to the Azazel. Right? So, because there was no vidui that the Kayin said on the Sa'ir that was shechted for the Yidden inside the Beis HaMikdash. The Kayin only said vidui on the Sa'ir that he sent off to the Azazel. And it's that vidui that's mechaper for all of the Averis. Kach vidui shel par mechaper ala Kayin b'shar Averis. So too by the Kayin, for the Kayanim, so the carbon, the par that was brought for them, there was a vidui that was said right there for that. So therefore the Kayanim, the kapara of all the rest of the Averis, was not through the Sa'ir HaMishtalayach, it was also through the vidui that was said on that par. Since there was a vidui set for them separately, it's that vidui that's mechaper for all the Kayanim. Dr. Gemara, now we come back to the main halacha that we were talking about regarding the bloods over here. What happens when it's spilled? What do you have to do over? So there's a machlokes about this. So Tana Rabbanah, we learned in the Brais. Pasuk says, "V'kila mechaper es hakodesh." You conclude of being mechaper in the kodesh. What is kodesh referred to here? Is elifnai v'lifnim. This is in the kodesh hakadoshim. Then it says in the continuation of that pasuk that you conclude also in the oil mayit zahechel. That's the zrika of the blood in the heichel. Then when it says mizbeach, you concluded the zrika on the mizbeach kamashmai. It refers to the mizbeach. What does this teach us? Melamed shekulan kapara b'fnei atzmon. Each, and from this we learn that each one of these three stages of the zrikas are separate for themselves. Now, mikan omru. Based on this, they said. And Rashi here explains that the mikan omru really refers to what's going to come after, not on what we're going to say right now. But the Gemara first starts off this halacha with the following point. Nasan miktsas matanis shebifnim. If you were doing the Aveda in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and you did part of the zrikas there, and then v'nishbach adam, the blood spilled in the middle, yavi dam acher, you have to bring new bloods, v'yaschel b'tchila matanis shebifnim. You have to start all over again from the beginning. This is the Tanakama. Like we had in our Mishnah, this opinion as well. But Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon Oimrim, they say no, eina maschel ela memakim shepasak. If the blood spilled, you start exactly from where you stop. Gamar esamatanis shebifnim. If you completed all of these zrikas done in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and then v'nishbach adam, and then the blood spilled before you began the next stage in the heichal and so on. Now Yavi dam acher, you bring the new bloods, and everybody agrees what you do. V'yaschel b'tchila b'matana shebeichel. You start over there by the next stage of the matana shebeichel. You don't have to start again from the beginning of the matanas of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So this is what the Mikan Omru is going on. The Mikan Omru is going on this Gomar, that between one stage and another, if the blood spills, it's considered to be separate, like the pasuk indicates. There's Kodesh, there's Oyel Mayit, and there's Mizbeach, and therefore if the blood spills in between, you start from the new stage, not from before. Now the Braisa goes through the same process, the same machlokes regarding the other stages here. Nasan miktsas matanis shebeichel. If you did part of the aveda of the bloods that has to be done inside the heichel, the nishbach adam, and in the middle the blood spilled. Yavi dam achi, you have to bring new blood. V'yaschel, so the Tanakama says v'yaschel betchila beheichel. Start all over again from this stage, from the bloods in this heichel. You have to bring new blood and you begin from where you stop. You don't have to start from the beginning again. If you completed this full stage of all the bloods being sprayed in the heichal, and now the blood spilled, you bring new blood. You start from the next stage of the matanis of the mizbeach, and I don't have to go back to the beginning. That everyone agrees to. Going to the next stage, the same thing. You sprayed part of the bloods that have to go onto the mizbeach, and now the blood spills in the middle. You bring new blood. The Tanakama says you start over from the beginning of this stage, from the start of all these matanis on the mizbeach. Wherever it's spilled, that's from where you begin again. Now the Braisa concludes, if you finish spraying all the bloods on the mizbeach, this is the last stage of the zrikis, and now the nishbach adam, the blood spills, everybody agrees that the rest of the blood that usually would have to be taken to be spilled onto the yisoid, on the foundation of the mizbeach, that is not a must, and therefore you don't have to shech the carbon all over again to go and pour the blood on the yisoid of the mizbeach. That's the machlokes that we had in the Mishnah. The Braisa just spelled out all three of the stages of the zrikis here. So now the Gemara brings the source and the basis for their machlokes. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shneim, Mikra, Echad, Darshu. Both of them base their opinion on the same pasuk, because there's a pasuk, and this is in Parshas Kisisa when it talks about the Mizbeach HaPnimi. So there it says what the purpose of the Mizbeach is, that what you do, you take midam chatas hakipurim from the karbonis of the chatas of Yom Kippur, achas bashana, once a year, and you put it on this Mizbeach. So how do you darshan this? Chatos achas bashana. Rab Meir Sava, Rab Meir understands this pasuk. Chatos achas amartilach. All of the blood being sprayed has to be coming from one chatos. It can't be coming from two chatois. So if the blood spills in the middle of your process, you can't bring the new carbon, a second chatos, and just complete from where you left off, because then you're going to have these zrikis being done by two chatois. You have to start from the beginning, that it should be done only from one chatos. It says chatos, and then it says achas bashana. That's the Tanakama, Rab Meir. The Gemara here says the Tanakama is Rab Meir, Stam Mishnah is Rab Meir. Rab Elazar and Rab Shimon Savri, but they all know when it says chatos, it's not referring to the actual carbon. It's referring to the action of the spraying of the blood. Chitui echad amartilach. The pasuk is saying that these zrikas, these sprayings, chitui means the actual sprayings of the blood. It has to be done only once, v'lo shnei chituyin, and not twice. So if it's spilled in the middle, you can't start over from the beginning, because you're going to have certain zrikas that are being done twice. The Torah is saying that it should be done only once, and even if it spills, it should not be repeated a second time. So that's their machlokes based on this pasuk. Does it refer to the actual carbon, chatos, or to the action of the spraying of the bloods? The Gemara brings in here other applications of this machlokes of the Tanakama, Rab Meir, and Elazar, Rab Shimon, in a case where it's spilled, whether we apply their machlokes in other cases as well. And the Gemara starts off with Mitzayra. Tanya Amar Rebbe. So we learned in a Braise that Rebbe said, Li cholak Rabbi Yaakov belugin. To me, Rabbi Yaakov came and said that when it comes to the lugin, which is the amounts of oil that we used to spray for a Mitzayra. By a Mitzayra, there was oil that was brought, that was sprayed towards the inside of the Beis HaMikdash, and then it was placed on the thumb and on the big toe of the Mitzayra. Then it was also placed on his ear. So that blood, it's not blood, sorry, it's oil actually. This blood that was, oil again, that was used for the Mitzayra, over there, Rabbi Yaakov told me that if it's spilled in the middle, this is different than over here when it spills, when the blood spills in Yom Kippur. And how is it different? The Gemara doesn't even spell this out, but Rashi explains that when it comes to the blood of Yom Kippur, so we had here the machlokes. Do you have to start over from the beginning, or do you continue where you're holding? And that was based on this pasuk of chatos. What does chatos mean? So Rabbi Yaakov told Rebbe that over here, benigayat to the oil that spills by the Mitzayra, everybody agrees that from the place where you stop, that's where the place you have to continue. You don't start again from the beginning. And Rashi says, the reason is, if you look in Rashi, he brings the pasuk, because the lashon of the pasuk is, loig echad shemen. You take one lug of oil. So loig echad shemen means only one lug. You can't, if it spills, you can't use a second lug, and therefore everybody will agree over here that if it's spilled, sorry, I said it wrong before, if it's spilled, everybody will agree that you have to start from the beginning. Not that you take off from where you left off. Everybody will agree that here you have to start from the beginning, because you only could use one lug. You can't use two lugin to start off where you interrupted. So here there's no machlokes. That's what Rebbe reported in the name of Rabbi Yaakov. But the Gemara asks him, there's a clear brayso that says not so, but v'loy, is it? Did they not argue? Did Rab Meir and Rab Eliezer and Rab Shimon not have their same machlokes regarding a Mitzayra? V'atanya, we learned clearly in a brayso. Nosan miktsas matanis shebifnim. If you took this oil and you sprayed it towards the Beis HaMikdash, it's not actually taken inside. It's sprayed towards the inside. And you did part of it, I think it has to be sprayed 7 times. Yeah, so he sprayed it, part of them, towards the inside. And v'nishbach halug. And then the lug of oil spilled. Yavi, so the Tanakama says, Yavi lugach v'yaschel b'tchila matanis v'yaschel b'tchila. And you have to start again all over. Just bring another lug and start from the beginning. B'matanis shebehechel. V'yaschel b'tchila, you have to start again in the beginning, b'matanis shebehechel. And the matanis that are being done in the hechel. I believe it refers to these matanis that you spray towards the inside. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Elazar and Rab Shimon Aimrim. Rabbi Elazar and Rab Shimon say, Mimokim shepasak u'maschel. From exactly where you stop, that's from where you begin. So you see clearly the same exact machlokes that we said before Yom Kippur applies over here to the Mitzayra. Gomar matanis shebehechel. If you finish the matanis of the hechel, the oil that was used to spray inside, and now the nishbach halug, and now the lug spilled, what do? Yavi lug acher v'yaschel betchila b'matanisha b'behainis. You start with the matanis that are placed on the behainis, on the thumb and on the finger of the foot of the kain, of the mitzayda, that is. What's the Braisa saying over here? Exactly the same thing like we said before regarding Yom Kippur. If the blood spills in between one stage and another, you don't have to start over from the beginning. Same thing over here. This oil also has two stages. The first stage is the oil that is used to spray towards the Beis HaMikdash, towards the inside. Then the next stage is that you take that oil and you place it on the thumb and on the foot. So if it spills in between, everybody agrees that you don't have to go back to the first stage, you just start with the second stage. Then what happens if nasa miktsas matanis bebahainis v'nishbach halug, in the second stage, in the middle, the oil spills, yavi log acher, you have to bring a new log, v'yaschel betchila matanis bebahainis. You have to start again from this stage, from the beginning of placing the blood on the thumb and so on. Again, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, they argue that you begin from there where you stop. Now what happens? There's actually a third stage here. What do you do with this oil after you place it on the thumb, and then after you place it on the ears? What do you do afterwards? So if you finish all of those matanis, v'nishbach haloig, and then it's spilled, divrei hakoil, everybody agrees, matanis haroish, the oil here that's placed on the head of the mitzayre, loy ma'akvais. That's not necessary to be done. If you have leftover oil, you place it on his head. But if you don't have leftover oil, it's not placed on his head. Rashi brings the pasuk, you place on his head. So if you don't have leftover oil, everybody agrees you don't have to bring more oil to do this. So now, the point is, over here you see clearly, the same machlokes of Rab Meir, Rab Elazar, Rab Shimon that's over there in Yom Kippur applies to the Mitzayra. So we say that Rab Yaakov said that it does not apply. So the Gemara changes it. Eime, so to say, Li Shana, Rab Yaakov Bilugin, Rab Yaakov taught me that the same machlokes that applies in Yom Kippur applies here also regarding the lug that was brought for the Mitzayra. Now the Gemara goes and explains the last detail that it said here in this Braisa. Omamar, what did it say? Matanis haroish emakvais. The oil used to place on the head of the mitzayre, if that spilled and it couldn't be done, it's not necessary. You don't have to bring more oil. My time, what's the reason? All the other matanis, if it spills, you have to bring more. Why doesn't this have to be brought again? More to be able to do this. Ileime is the reason because it refers to this as only naisar, that if it's leftovers, then you pour it on his head. So maybe that indicates that only if it's leftovers, but if it's spilled, so then you don't have to do it. But if that's the case, ela meyata, if that expression v'hanaisa means that it's not a must that it should be there, if so, say the same thing regarding every single carbon mincha. The Torah uses the expression by a carbon mincha, v'hanaiseres min ha-mincha. What happens by a mincha? You have all the flour and the oil that was brought for the carbon mincha. The kain takes off a kaimitz, and then there's the leftovers that are going to be eaten by the kainim or by the owner. And over there, hachanami, are you going to say there as well, deloi ma'akfi, that the leftovers of the mincha after you take off the kaimit don't have to remain there? And if it spills, it's okay. But we know that that's not the halacha, as Rashi here brings this, and we learned it once before, that leftovers after you take off the kaimits has to remain fully intact in order to be able to bring the kaimits. If any of it spills, then you can't even be makir of the kaimits. So we see when the Torah writes v'haniseres, it has to be there all the way, completely. And if it spills, it's not good. So why there when it says v'hanoisim and Hashem, are we saying that if it spills, you don't have to bring more oil? So the Gemara answers that it's different. Shani hasam, over there by the mitzayit it's different. Tichsiv, because over here the Torah uses this expression of leftovers twice. The first time it says umi yeser, that you have the oil that you use to spray towards the heichal inside the Beis HaMikdash, and then it says, what do you do with the leftovers of that? You put it on the thumbs and on his ears and so on. That's the first time it says leftovers, umi yeser. And then it says again, and if there's even leftovers of that, v'hanoiser, then the leftovers of the leftovers you pour on his head. So over here, because it says twice the expression of leftovers, on that I say that if it actually isn't leftover, if it spills, that you don't have to do anything. You don't have to bring more. The Gemara continues now and applies this machlokes of Rab Meir and Rab Elazar and Rab Shimon regarding if it spills, if you have to start over from the beginning, if not, regarding another one of the karbanos of the mitzayre. Rabbi Yochanan says, Asham Mitzaira. The Mitzaira has to bring 3 karbanos actually. A Mitzaira, a Asham that is, and a Chatas, and the oil, I believe. So the Asham of the Mitzaira, Sheshachta Shalei Lishma. It was Shechted Shalei Lishma. What happens if you shecht a carbon Shalei Lishma? So this is, to understand the Gemara, it's only with what Rashi here brings, that the Gemara says in the beginning of Zvachim, any carbon shechted Shalei Lishma in the Beis HaMikdash, the rule is, the carbon itself is kosher. It doesn't require the Lishma for the carbon itself to be kosher. But the obligation that the owner had in bringing this carbon, he did not fulfill his obligation. He's going to have to bring the carbon again. That's the rule with all karbanis right in the beginning of Masechtas Vachim. So here the Mitzaira brings this carbon, Shalei Lishma. The carbon is a kosher carbon. You could do all the avodas with the carbon, all the zrikis and everything. But for the owner, he has to bring a carbon over again. But now there's an issue here. Could you bring a second carbon or not? Bano l'machleikis Rab Meir v'Rab Elazar v'Rab Shimon. Will this Mitzaira be able to correct this and bring a second Asham? This is going to be dependent on this Machlekes of Rab Meir, Rab Elazar, Rab Shimon. How? Rab Meir the Amar Yavi Acher v'Yaschol b'Tchila. Rab Meir that says that if the blood spills in the middle of the process where you were spraying the bloods, so then what you do is you bring a new carbon and you start over from the beginning. So Hachanami here as well. Yavi Acher v'Yishchait. Let him bring a new carbon asham, let him shecht it again, and let him start from the beginning. As Rashi explains, because what you see from Rab Meir's opinion is, if it spills in the middle, so all these rikas that you've done until here, until this point, are null and void. You have to start over from the beginning. So therefore it's the same thing with this carbon asham. Even if you brought this asham, and you did all the avodas with it, you sprayed the blood with this asham, but it's all worthless. Because since with the bailim it didn't work, you start all over again, and you bring a second asham, and there's no problem. But according to Rabbi Elazar and Rab Shimon, you're going to run into a problem. They say, when the blood spills, so the blood that you did, the zrikis that you've done, are good. You just have to continue from where you left off. So if so, Rashi explains over here as well, since this carbon itself is a kosher carbon, even if it wasn't effective for you, but the carbon itself is a kosher carbon, so whatever was done is done. You can't consider it to be completely null and void. If you're going to want to bring a second carbon again to make up for the fact that you weren't yotzi your chiyuv, so now what's going to happen is you're basically bringing 2 carbon ashams. This Mitzaira is doing 2 carbon ashams. What's the problem with that? So Rashi here brings the pasuk. It says that the Mitzaira has to bring a keves echad asham. Only one asham, not 2. So therefore, he's going to have a problem. So therefore, hacha ein leitakana. He can't bring a second carbon asham because it's going to come out. He had the first carbon asham, which was effective, where the carbon itself was kosher, and now he's bringing a second carbon asham. So it's 2 instead of 1. So he's stuck. This is a Mitzaira that will never be able to do the karbanos properly to be able to sanctify himself. That's what. Who's this? Rabbi Yochanan said the application of the machlekes over here. Maskefle Rav Chisda asked on this. You're telling me that only Rabbi Elazar and Rab Shimon say that he's going to have a problem, that he can't bring a second carbon? Even Rab Meir would agree to that, because Vaha Oisai Ksiv. Over here in the pasuk, when it says that the Mitzaira has to bring a carbon, it says clearly V'hikriv Oisai. There's an extra word saying Oisai, that he only brings 1 carbon for the asham, and not a second one. So if he made a mistake and he said he did it Shalei Lishma, you cannot bring a second one. Over here, even Rab Meir would agree. Kashya. This remains a question, and therefore, Rabbi Yochanan's pshat to apply the machlekes here is difficult to understand. Here everyone agrees because of this limud of Oisai. But nevertheless, the Gemara brings a braisa that proves what Rabbi Yochanan said. Tanya kvasei de Rabbi Yochanan. We have in a braisa exactly what Rabbi Yochanan said. Asham Mitzaira sheshachta Shalei Lishma. The Asham Mitzaira that was shachta Shalei Lishma. Oy shalinasam midam elegabe b'hainis. So you didn't do everything that was supposed to be done. One of the things that has to be done is that the blood is also placed on the fingertips of this Mitzaira, on his thumb and so on. And you didn't do that. So even though it was Shalei Lishma and you didn't complete everything to be done with the Mitzaira, but nevertheless the blood is brought on the Mizbeach, and v'tan nesachim, and you bring the nesachim for this carbon asham as well. But for the Mitzaira himself, v'tzarich asham acher la'achshira. He's going to have to bring a second asham because it was done Shalei Lishma. He didn't do what he's supposed to be done with the blood. He has to bring a second asham. So this is clearly like Rabbi Yochanan. That you can bring a second carbon asham. Tzarich, you need to bring a second one, like Rabbi Meir's opinion. So Rav Chisda said, Rav Chisda Malach, Rav Chisda that asked the question on Rabbi Yochanan said, that it says Oisai, that you could only bring one, Rabbi Chisda will answer and tell you, my tzarech, you know what tzarech here means? Tzarech, he needs to. He would have to bring a second one because it wasn't done right. But vein le takana, but it can't be done because it says Oisai, he needs to, but he can't. And he's stuck. That's what it meant to say. So the Gemara asks him that, is that how you learn a braisa? V'tani tanet tzarech? Does a braisa use this term tzarech that he needs to do so? And what the braisa really means to say is ve'en loy takana, that it can't be done? Tzarech usually means he needs to do it and he could get it done. That's what tzarech here means. So the Gemara says yes, sometimes the word tzarech could mean that it has to be done this way, and he can't do it. And the Gemara brings a source for this. V'hatanya, like we learned in the Braisa regarding a nazir. Nazir memeiret. Now, nazir that's bald. One of the things that a nazir has to do when he comes at the completion of his naziris is to shave off all of his hair that he didn't cut for whatever while he was a nazir, and then that hair is burnt by the pot of the whatever by the karbanis of the naziris. So, what happens if the nazir is bald? He has no hair to cut. Beis Shammai Emrim, so Beis Shammai say tzarech avaras tar. He needs to go with the blade and cut off the hair. He has to put it over his head. Beis Shammai says. Beis Hillel Emrim ain't tzarech avaras tar. If he has no hair, so then he doesn't have to do this. Now, what did Beis Shammai mean when he said tzarech? He has no hair. Rabbi Avina explained, Kisha Emrim Beis Shammai tzarech. When Beis Shammai says he needs to do so, what he meant to say is tzarech. Since the Torah says he has to cut his hair, he has to do this, but he has no hair, and therefore ve'en le takana. There's nothing he can do, so he's stuck. So here we see that the term tzarech means that he has to do so, but he can't do it. Same thing before regarding the mitzayre, that the tzarech means that he has to do it, but he can't do it. But the Gemara brings an argument on this. Uplige the Rabbi Pedos. This argues on the way Rabbi Pedos understood Beis Shammai's opinion, because he understood that tzarech means that he has to do so, and he actually does it. Rabbi Pedos said, Beis Shammai v'Rabbi Elazar amru davar echad. Beis Shammai and Rabbi Elazar about this nazir say the same thing. Beis Shammai hadam maram. Beis Shammai, this Mishnah here regarding this mitzayre, this nazir that's bald, and Rabbi Elazar says the same thing as well in a braisa. The Tanya, we learned in a braisa or the Tanan in a Mishnah. Ein loy bayin yad. What happens with a nazir or a mitzayre that does not have the tips of his fingers? He was cut off. Or bayin regel. He doesn't have the tips of the finger for his feet that he has to put the blood on it. Ein loy tare lomis, because he's missing those tips, so he could never be done. You can never place it on that place. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Elazar says, Naisen al mekaymai v'yaitze. You put it on whatever he does have of where in his body, in that area. So even if it was cut off the tips, you put it there, and he's yaitza with that. That's what Rabbi Elazar says. So what Rabbi Pedos is saying is that according to the Beis Shammai, it's the same thing. Even if you don't have hair to cut off, what does he do? He goes with a blade on his head in the area where he would have hair, as if he's cutting off his hair. So therefore, tzarech actually means that you do so. Rab Shimon says, Im nasan al shel smoil yotza. In such a case where a person doesn't have the tips of his fingers to be done where it's usually done on the right hand, so he goes to the left hand. B'diavad, it can be done on the left hand. Okay, so this concludes this section, this machlokes, whether you could apply the machlokes of Rab Meir, Rab Shimon, benigay to the mitzayre, benigay ufi shechte the carbon shaloi l'shma. The Gemara continues, Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Braisa regarding the halacha of how the blood was received by a mitzayre. Tana Rabbanan, so we learned, it says over there in the pasuk, V'lokach midam ha'asham, you take from this blood of the asham for the mitzayre, the carbon of the mitzayre. So how do you take this blood? Yochel bekeli. I would think that you take it like it's usually done by every carbon inside a keli. That's why it's always done when you receive the blood of a carbon. Talmud Laima. Therefore, the pasuk over here says right after it says v'lokach v'nosan, that you place that blood on the body of the mitzayre, on his hands, on his feet, and so on. Man is sine ba'atzme shel kayin, just like when it says v'nosan, that's done with the hands of the kayin. Af lekiche ba'atzme shel kayin. So too, when he receives the blood, the kayin is receiving the blood directly into his hand, and from there he's placing it on the body of the mitzayre. Now, I would think that this is also true regarding the blood of this carbon asham. That's then going to also be sprayed on the mizbeach. That the kohen receives it in his hand. Talmud Laima, the pasuk there comes and clarifies and says, Ki kachatas ha'asham. That we compare the chatas to the asham, and which means who? Ma chatas to nekeli. Just like when you receive the blood of a chatas, it's done with a keli. Af asham to nekeli. Here, even though the Torah came and made a distinction that you receive in your hands, that's this new zrika that's done on the body of the mitzayre. But what's done on the mizbeach, that still goes back to the way it's done by the chatas and it's done in a keli. So it's a nimtzis ataimis. If so, it comes out asham mitzayre. When it comes to the blood of the asham mitzayre, shnei kainim mekablim is damai. You need two kainim to receive the blood. Echad biyad, one kain receives the blood in his hands to be placed on the mitzayre himself, and v'echad bekeli, another kain with a keli like every chatos. Zeh shekibel bekeli balei etzem mizbeach, the one that received it in the keli will come and use it to spray in the mizbeach. V'zeh shekibel biyad balei etzem mitzayre, and the one that received it in his hands will come to the mitzayre to spray it on the body of the mitzayre.